you, Mario West. She let me borrow these. This might be a theme, and got to make sure to sync it to the little intro music. Hello, welcome. Happy Catterday. This is Saturday, March 18th. Coming up on the spring equinox, we had a wonderful discussion with Rodney Goodwin last week. Check that out if you kind of interested on springing forward into the new season with some interesting insights to things. But today we have a wonderful guest, John Roeland, where I wish I saw him strolling in the East Bay someday. I'm on the other side, and he's
on the ride.
Yeah, buddy. With the Natural Freedom League, with Will Keller and such, and them Funky Fathers or something like that. Yeah, John's a great conscious parent. He's a magician and a musician, teacher, and a natural law trivium enthusiast. And speaking of the trivium, there is a conference coming up in June, I want to say, regarding freedom under natural law. Funnel Conference number 3, hence the 3 points of the triangle of a trivium. So this will be thrice great as far as, you know, who's going to be coming over and all that. Not to get into some hermetic trismegistus, but John is one of our guests that we had on our wish list, and so glad to have you on. Honored and a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. And I'm Leslie Powers, co-host here, and I've known John for over 2 years now, really working together as a team in a supportive little community we've created, and really respect John as a thinker and somebody who really has taken action, you know, responded to the call for action and gone out and been very active in the streets of the East Bay and Sacramento area, teaching natural law, encouraging dialogue and conversation among people, continuing to be creative, and I think pioneering in going forward with this topic of natural law, and he's perfect here for dissolving the divide. He's brought a topic forward today that he's calling resolving the paradox. So with that, I'll give it to you, John, to explain a little bit about what you're thinking.
Yes. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on. And as Leslie said, I've known Leslie for a few years. And when I started seeing what Leslie and Derek were doing, Derek, I've known from afar. You know, we actually haven't met in person yet. I had to think, did we meet? But, you know, he's a local Northern California folks as well. And so, you know, definitely feel the vibe of what you guys are doing. And it was like definitely on the same wavelength of where my mind was going. So it was like about 3 years ago today that Natural Freedom League started going out on the streets in the midst of the, you know, all the bull. And just trying to teach about natural law. And yeah, I've been kind of like a little bit of a hermit the last few months, but my mind has been on like this kind of stuff that you guys are talking about, like truth discovery, what I'm calling the discernment principle, and spiritual guidance or spiritual development is what that's sort of like my mantra. And so originally, before Natural Freedom League, I had this idea called the Natural Universal Spirit, or the NUS, which is basically my idea of God, the way, the Great Spirit, the energy, the ether that flows through all of us, that's invisible, that invisible force that animates everything. That is God. That we have the ability to access that. We are part of that. We are individuated, like, you know, fractal of that source, and you know, to work with it and to see it. So I tied in the natural law stuff, was like the natural law is like showing you how the NUS functions, how the natural universal spirit functions. But the natural universal spirit should be looked at as like a living entity, right? Mm-hmm. And like that we are part of that living entity and organism, and all the organisms within it live, you know, it's all that one unity conscious type thinking. So the natural universal spirit initially was me just talking about, you know, God in that way, and, you know, kind of writing poetry about it and stuff like that. And then like also tying in the natural law stuff. But then I haven't worked on it in a while, but I've gotten into a lot of Rudolf Steiner, and Rudolf Steiner believed in using the thinking capacity, the rational mind or thought process of man, the consciousness of man, that specific level of consciousness, that you could get to spiritual abilities and there's spiritual organs that are connected that you have to develop, but you have to develop through the rational thinking mind, the logical mind that like has, you know, defined our eon, the eon that we all came up in, right? Like the materialist perspective to an extent. But he was trying to tie it in with the spirit and show you that the spirit's connected with it, and he called it spiritual science. I mean, it really is natural law. Like that's what they're talking about, you know, like this invisible force that animates everything that we can connect to. And Steiner is saying like your thinking capacity is connected to that. So in thinking in those terms, I started developing the natural universal spirit as like this concept of how we discover truth, how we talk about truth and share ideas, how we eliminate things that don't fit, right? The trivium process, right? So I've come up with some things, and this is actually the first time I'm sharing this stuff, so I'm happy to do it on your guys' show.
Cool.
It's the perfect fit. Okay, so the NUS is truth discovery, the discernment principle, and spiritual development. To begin, you need to get into a state of reception. Okay. Kabbalah means to receive, right? Information comes to us through our rational mind and through thinking about things and coming up with the rhetoric and using the trivium and creating stuff that way. But real revelation comes to you like it just hits you, you know, like the people, the great men over time, they've just basically channeled this information, right? I mean, the information exists, the knowledge is in the NUS, in the nous. Okay. It's another word to look up. We talked about this, the nous. I didn't know this. I wrote about the NUS, and some lady on Twitter, a good friend, not just some lady, she's been a good supporter of my work. She said, "Do you mean the nous? N-O-U-S?" And I was like, "Oh no, what's that?" I looked it up, and like I have heard about it before. I didn't remember it being called the nous, but it's the noosphere. It's the sphere outside of all the different levels that whatever we're on the earth. The highest sphere is the noosphere, and it's like, I mean, basically you could think of it as the Akashic records, and it is the NUS. It's the natural universal spirit. It's the sort of like you know, the Greeks talked about it. It's like that realm of like ideals that we draw things from, or the realm of thoughts where things exist before we pull it into the manifested realm. So anyway, so that was a weird like synchronicity when I realized that this word, the nous, was like very similar to what I was thinking of the NUS. And,
so I just looked it up, and it says, well, two definitions. One is common sense, practical intelligence, and then the other would be the mind or intellect, right?
See?
So interesting.
The
and then
all
there's
is mind.
noose like, you know, a rope too, which
Right.
is
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Yeah, universal Godhead, you know, source energy, you know, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in
there's so many
French,
terms
what
for
is
it.
nous in French, or in Latin?
N-O-U-S just means we.
Oui.
Not
Yeah.
like we as in oui, monsieur. It just means
But in-
W-E, like us. We.
Us.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that
The
actually
NUS.
fits too.
Yeah, man.
The NUS.
The
Us.
the
I just
us,
pronounced
all of
new.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look at the
man.
new the nous, N-O-U-S. It's like, and it's just so crazy. So then you know, from there, another tie into that is like a few years back, I watched this video about Carl Jung and how Carl Jung was an occultist. And at the end of his life, he went through like all this crazy stuff where he had like these revelations, and he envisioned the fall of man as like we started out here as these spiritual beings, and we fell through these different realms down to earth, down to the material level, the material plane, really the plane of illusions, right? But it seems real, right? And so he had the diagram you look at. It really is the inspiration for the Natural Freedom League logo, right? The Natural Freedom League logo has in the middle the pine cone, which is the pineal gland, and then it has all the different levels on the outside of it. Part of the inspiration of that logo was the noose. But I just learned about the noose like 6 months ago, so it's just so crazy that I'm sure I've heard of it before. Excuse me. I'm sure I've heard of it before, but I also think it's where the word noumena comes from, right? You have like
numinous
phenomena.
Even Numenor.
Something like a phenomena. No, we're just gonna break into song like all through this.
Yeah, that's perfectly cool.
Rhymaholics, man.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a lot of stuff that people growing up, and this is kind of why we have this paradox, because we're not taught these things and how to like discern for the truth, and if we're taught is correct or not, and things are so contrived now over centuries of indoctrination and manipulation and what have you. So we think of the public school, the Common Core, as if this is like ironclad education type of thing. But you go into the Hermetic principles, you read something like the Kabbalion. It's like, hey, I didn't learn a lick of this in school. Yeah. And I paid how much money for that shit? And our taxpayer money is paying for how much for just income tax alone is paying for the public schools, like so much money.
Right.
And it's the kind of like second, third rate education where it could be a lot better. But so it just brings up people to have this certain mind state and way of discerning their own truths or whatever, or having the perspective of not being able to like see the truth for what it is sometimes. And there's so many lies being thrown at us all the time that people go with the popular narratives rather sometimes. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking about, when you're talking about the nous, that you're talking about a mind state, or you made reference to being in a certain state of mind in order to receive information, in order to find truth. And I thought we could expand a little on that, because from my perspective as a clinical social worker, psychotherapist, there's a model that I'm studying called internal family systems. And part of and it's not a new idea, it's an old idea being recirculated, but it involves being in what we call self energy, which is a state of centered witness. And there's like a bunch of C words they use to describe it, like compassion, curiosity, clarity, creativity, calmness, confidence, courage, and connectedness. And when you're in that state and then you're looking at yourself or at the world, you're in a much clearer state to receive the knowledge and the insights and intuition. And I'm wondering if that resonates, those qualities kind of resonate or match what you're thinking about.
Yep. That's awesome that you said that, because my first idea, I think, is the primary thing that needs to start with is the importance of breathing. And I was listening to this audiobook the other day about Hindu yogic breathing and how they looked, there's two ways of looking at breathing. It's like as a physical, biological, mechanism, but then the more occult idea of breathing, as the word is, spirit, right? They're breathing in spirit. They called it prana, right? I mean, I think what they called it, chi, right? Chi energy in China. And it's like, you can breathe it in, right? And like, I mean, just a basic thing this book was talking about is that we're supposed to breathe through our nose, You're not supposed to inhale through your mouth. Your mouth is
the
to
noose, kind of like phonetics with that. That's
the
interesting.
nose,
All
the
right.
noose, right? So yeah, beautiful, right? Oh my gosh. I mean, and so I mean, just think about that. What we teach kids. To teach kids, you're supposed to inhale through your nose. You're breathing in the spirit. You're breathing in life. Like how simple, but elegant that like, and that is like so huge when you do that. When you,
Yeah. It's your anchor, right? It's your anchor between heaven and earth in a way,
yeah,
between spirit and material.
exactly. And it's, you get into this understanding of the alignment of it, and that you are getting to that center point, but there's beams of energy coming at you from every angle. You're sucking in the universe, you're sucking in the nus, and you're breathing it out. And by not understanding how to do that, then you're not doing it the right way, and it's corrupted, right? So mouth breather, right? And it's the perfect thing. They call people mouth breathers, and it's like, this is something you can train yourself to do. This isn't that you have to be a mouth breather. And something interesting, I really like Wim Hof, but it ties in with this. I saw Eric Dubé do a video about the Wim Hof breathing technique, and he was saying that he's basically taking techniques from yogic breathing, but what he's doing wrong is he's telling you to breathe in through your mouth. I've done the Wim Hof thing, and I had a good experience with that breathing in through the mouth. You're basically like hyperventilating yourself to an extent, but I think that we should focus on the ancient understanding of this, and then sort of meld the two together. If there's good stuff about what Wim Hof is doing, but also look at what the yogic people were doing. I tend to trust that ancient knowledge a little more, but point being, I mean, Wim Hof is a good example of how breathing is coming into people's consciousness more too.
For sure. Yeah.
And that of course ties into meditation, right? Which would be the next step.
Breath, meditation. So when we're talking about, we have all these controversial topics out in the world. We have all these disagreements and debates. People are just jumping in reactively to dialogue or converse about them. And what I'm hearing you saying is, wait a minute, we need to first start with ourselves and prepare ourselves, in a sense, to have these dialogues in order to actually find the synthesis and the unity. It takes a certain mindset and a mental preparation in mind and body.
Exactly. And we have to, as people who have been researching for a long time, we have to make ourselves, make sure that we know that we don't know. Right? Like knowing and believing. That, talk about a paradox. Okay. This is one that I just was getting into the other day. I mean, I've been going through this for a long time. Like, once I got into the natural law stuff, and of course, like Natural Freedom League is, all very much based on that idea that like objective morality, right? And, knowing and believing, and like how believing is somehow wrong, right? But like what I'm seeing is you can't separate knowing and believing, right? They're the polarities, right? In a way, knowing and believing, they appear to be, but in reality, they're actually inseparable. My point being is that if one guy I listened to, he says, and he's for belief, right? He says, knowledge is just petrified belief, right? But then I flipped it and said, you could just as well say, belief is petrified knowledge, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's like what you think you know is going to shape your belief, right? But then your belief is going to shape your knowledge. It's like they just go hand in hand. You take the knowledge you have that you think you know, and from that you draw a conclusion, and that's your belief of how the world works.
Rigid. It can leave you in a rigid, petrified state, right, where you're inflexible and not willing to reconsider things, right?
Exactly. This morning I randomly saw a video, growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and I thought it was applicable to what we're talking about. It's like the mindset, even like you can think something like pretty well, but if you stay open to like, well, I don't know, maybe I don't know, let me look at this, and then you look at it, like really look at it, and then you draw your conclusion. Now that may not fit with everybody, and no, from what I've seen, nobody has it 100%, 100% everything. Like everyone has like a piece. And so, you have to, again, resolve those paradoxes for yourself where, again, for me, like belief is the enemy of knowing, right? Is a famous saying by Crow 777, and it's like, but you can't get rid of belief completely. I mean, I guess you could, but where would that leave you?
It seems like we're all in a state of seeking truth, or not, those of us who seek truth, we're seeking the truth. And do we ever fully arrive at the full knowing of truth? Because it seems to me there's increasingly complex aspects of our reality and of truth, and that we may keep stepping forward and expanding our view, but how do we know when we've arrived to the complete truth knowing? And so the belief is sort of a place that we sit, for a while, when at our whatever capacity of understanding we have, we create a hypothesis.
Yeah, and how comfortable do you get with that, or how much do you challenge that? And the older you get, how much does that change? How much you're willing to consider, because like, even with the flat earth topic, it's like, I feel like there's an aspect of the people who don't agree with it, who are like, it couldn't be that crazy. And to me, I'm like, it totally is that crazy. It's that crazy. Like it's, and like, that kind of, anyway, my mind, I don't think questioning the objective, subjective of things takes away from the message of natural law, because if you really get into, like, this is another one, objective and subjective. Like when I really looked at the definition of objective, it says that it exists outside of your mind. It's like, well, how could we ever know that? How could we ever truly know anything that existed outside of the mind? And if you believe all is mind, then, I mean, I think they mean individual mind, but the definition of objective is of relating to or being an object, phenomenon, or condition in the realm of sensible experience, independent of individual thought and perceptible by all observers, having reality independent of the mind. Now, right there, I mean, things are occulted from us in this realm, right? We don't see everything, but some people do see more, right? And so is that objective, right? I mean, by this definition, that would not be objective. The spiritual realm, the things that we're talking about, the nous, that would not be objective, right?
Right.
But so, it's weird where objective actually kind of becomes more consensus.
Interesting definition. Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's what most people agree is like what we see. So, to me, I feel like there probably is an objective reality, but it's hidden from us. and we're always striving to see it.
Yes.
But that's part of the sort of challenge of this realm that we're on, is it is hidden from us. So there's another one. There's no lie in nature. Well, you could call that a lie, if we're not able to see everything and we're limited to these five senses, and even within those five senses to certain wavelengths. So now we know objectively, or it seems that like we have a limited ability to sense what's all going on. And so anyway, I just think that's an interesting, just another interesting one to think about. And again, this is just how my mind works, is like I'm constantly questioning the things that I believe. And so then it sort of makes, in a way, it doesn't make things wrong that I created before, but it's just like a different level, like, for example, in Natural Freedom League, the intention of Natural Freedom League is to expand the understanding of natural law, which is based on objective morality, and to expose the illegitimacy in the belief of authority, and thus the inherent immorality of all governments, right? And I don't think all government is inherently immoral now, right? Based on the technical definition of the word. But if I'm meaning the modern day belief of what government is, that government is this entity that controls our lives, then it's right. What we said was right. But if you look at government as meaning mind control, well, there are moral forms of mind control. If you control your own mind, that's moral. But also, anyway, I'm going off on a lot of different
Yeah. So John, clearly, in your path here, there have been subjects that have popped up that you've gravitated towards and mentally exploring through this concept. And what are some of the things that have come up for you that you've challenged?
So obviously, I mean, the big challenge for me, I already mentioned the shape of the earth. When I was into the natural law work, information, around like 2016, 2017, at that time, I was going through Mark Passio's work, and I knew he didn't buy into the flat earth thing, but I hadn't looked into it yet. And then I got into this conversation with my friend about Mark Passio, and my friend was like not feeling it, right? And he said, oh yeah, good luck, John, telling everyone they're Satanists. And I was like, yeah. I was like, we just agree to disagree. I kept saying that, but this guy was all fired up. And then he said, I'm not a flat earther either, John. And I was like, neither is Mark Passio, like, neither am I. Like, what do you like? I came up through, through the health freedom movement, right? AKA the anti-vaxxers, and I would hear people say, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. What are you, a flat earther too? Right. And I always thought, what a weird, like, why would they go there? Right. Like the health freedom movement, is legitimately based on people whose children were injured, right? It's not some crazy conspiracy that's outside of you. You can like talk to people and look at information, right? The flat earth thing is just like, seems so out there, right? And I'm like, why would they tie in like this with the craziest one? It seemed like a marketing ploy, almost like, let's tie these people in with the craziest conspiracies,
Yeah, and before Flat Earth, they would tie, the JFK, or, so you think 9/11's an inside job and all this stuff.
Right.
You're against our country and all that, so it's like the newest flavor of conspiracy sometimes that they want to tack on to any kind of movement that is, really in, morality and, in self-defense, like divine masculine, form, like in resisting, this oppression.
Right. Yeah, the whole term conspiracy theorist was allegedly created by the CIA for people who questioned what happened to Kennedy, so that's sort of like the beginning of it. But yeah, like you said, to me, when people were calling me flat earther, it was just like they were calling me conspiracy theorist, right? I was like, yeah, like I know this game. And then when I initially heard of it, a flat earth, I just thought, how would I really know? Right? How would I know? I haven't gone anywhere. I'm trusting what people are telling me. And I think a lot of people don't even like think that way. Right? They trust a lot of the information they're getting, even if they know it's corrupted. A lot of it they still trust, you know? And so so I looked into it and I was very open-minded. Like, and what I saw right away was that there's two models, right? The one that we're taught, you know, and then here's this other model where it's still round. There's just a barrier, supposedly of ice, blocking it in, but they don't know what's past the ice. It could be an infinite plane, right? We believe in infinite space in the globe Earth model. Maybe it's infinite plane. Like, why are those two things so? Why would one be crazy and one be legit, right? Like, they're just opposites basically. It's like clear space or clear, or infinite space or infinite land, right? Or maybe it's both basically. But anyway, point being, I was like, okay, there's two models, and like, if you look at each model, how does what you observe fit with each model? And just on its face, I would think anyone who really looks at it would have to admit that the flat Earth model, whatever is wrong about it, is more what we observe. So, for example, if I go outside and I look at the sun every day is going around me. That's what I see, is the sun going around me, right? And same with the moon. Now, mind you, this is in the flat Earth model. This is saying that it just goes around us on this plate, and it goes out of our vision, so we can't see it anymore. So it's so far away, it doesn't light us up anymore. And then when it comes back, it's closer to our view. So I'm like, to me, that makes more sense than we're spinning, and and everything's moving. Like, everything is very, very clock-like, right? It's
Right.
It's like clockwork. Everything is like, there's this flow to it like that. And so to me, what I saw fit more that model. Now, again, like I was talking to you guys before the show, like, I don't care what people believe in terms of this, but I do understand why it matters. And it does. I do think it matters, because I think truth matters no matter what's the truth. So you could say it's a psyop to distract us, but what I would say about that is that a psyop is actually a dialectic. So they're giving you, they're giving you multiple dialectics for the same event even, but they're giving you, here's two models, here's this one. You guys argue about it. And some people step out of that, try to resolve that paradox and say, well, maybe it's a little bit of both, right? And again, I think like the dynamic that happened, from what I have observed, is that the flat Earth came out and people thought, this is the craziest, this is the biggest lie of all. And they started preaching to the truth community, and the truth community, who hadn't really like considered it, was just kind of like, I don't know, maybe some people looked at it, some people didn't, whatever. I think people do, and they're also limited in what they can accept or who they trust. That's a big part of it, and so, and also what they believe is possible, right? Because a lie like that, it makes it seem like there's no way they could hide it. But I just don't think that way. I think that like anything is possible, and it appears as though we've been lied to about everything. So, but anyway, I think that what happened was, in the dynamics, is that the people who like couldn't really get into it yet just rejected the flat earthers as like, you guys are idiots, you're making us look bad. And then they started like attacking weaknesses in the flat earth model, which there are things wrong with the flat earth model, and there's things wrong with the globe earth model. So
but I've seen like dozens of different types of models of the flat earth like models that are out there, and I know a lot of them are kind of bush league, and there's a lot of young enthusiasts out there like, oh, discovering truth and all that. I have noticed that like a huge popularity in the flat earth, I'm not even going to call it like movement, but I guess the the revived, because this is going on for how many thousands of years, but at least today no one's getting stoned to death for talking about it.
Yeah,
I feel like back in the day people were ridiculed for trying to claim it was a globe back then. And I thought there were psyops back then of trying to discourage any kind of trade routes and voyagers on ships, like, oh, you're gonna sail off the cliff of the our flat earth thing type of thing. They weren't talking about any kind of ice thing, but and yeah, like from antiquity to today there's all types of depictions and diagrams of whether spherical disc or whatever, and it's just, yeah, it's interesting to look at, but I just see so much discord between whoever. It's like the same division being played out for over millennia, and we're not really getting anywhere, and it just seems almost worse than ever before, because with the social media and all these things and people on their virtual digital soapboxes, they can talk so much out of their ass and be held zero accountability for it and not get their asses whooped when people are talking shit on the internet like in the 90s or whatever, I like to say, but it's gotten to a point where it's so polarized, and like, oh, so if you don't believe in us, you're either a flat tard or a globe head, and we have these stupid little names to go along with these other compartmentalizations, while at the same time, like the mainstream media, I don't know if you noticed this, but I've noticed this in France for at least over 5 years, that the popularity of people wearing like NASA t-shirts skyrocketed, like kind of pun in that, but like no joke. But I know there's also like the Big Bang Theory type of nerdy shows out there that kind of promote that type of shit, and you got the Neil deGrasse Tysons and Bill Nye the scientism guy or whatever, so
no, I mean, and I think like that's the great thing, is that like you and me should be able to sit here and just talk about it, and I'd be like, yeah, well, this is what I see, and you're like, this is what I see, and we share information, right? And we're not like, you're a fucking idiot, dude. Like, it's like, I just think like that's just unproductive, ultimately. And, the thing you're talking about, the metaverse, right? It's like, it's gone to this new level now where like we can sit here and like have a conversation and do it live and bring up people, and actually have a discussion about this stuff. And I think the more that people are willing to step up to that, that's a huge part, because in going on with my idea, I've obviously barely even gone down my list of my different ideas of things that are important for truth discovery, but just we have to entertain thoughts, right? Basically not be afraid to like take on an idea. If we're so confident something is wrong, have the ability to sit there and explain it, and agree to disagree. If we agree to disagree, agree that there is a limit to what we actually know, right? Like we don't know for sure I don't know for sure the noose exists, right? Like I believe it's invisible for a reason, it's to have that, it's to develop that belief, and that affects how you see the world, what you create, and this fits perfectly with the natural law stuff, right? Because the more that belief is built on positive things that we're teaching our children, then the more truthful it will be that what they believe, what they can create, what they know they can create. Things that get created, you have to believe in it first.
Yeah, real quick, if you don't mind, like just going back to the whole thing of, the objectiveness and like getting centered into that like neutral center point of the nous, and like just source energy, and just like the all knowing, the all mind and mentalism, whatever. I feel like that can be really accessed with someone with a really activated or awakened intuition, because a lot of people's intuition are kind of dormant, or there's like the shadow ego side of that sometimes, so the perception can be distorted. And it's really tricky sometimes just to find, like, okay, we can agree to disagree and all this stuff, and there's limitations to that, but like I feel like looking on the bright side, like we have so much in common with each other, and we do share so many of the same values, yet it gets clouded over by one little trivial argument, or it could be bigger than that, but it just seems like, and I don't know if it's like opinions get people hurt, beliefs get people killed kind of thing. And I always go back to like belief in the religious connotation, and going back millennia, what do we have, like how many millions of dead people because of that?
Mm-hmm.
And we're still like praising whatever today in these books and whatnot, but have they really proved certain things that happened, and all these folklore stories and stuff? And what I wanted to say also is that some of the things in regards to like spiritual alchemy, and just like being connected to source and activating your chakras, and that metaphysical pranayama and all these things, it goes beyond some of the rational logic and all that stuff that we can put words to. There's things that are ineffable, and to like accept that for what it is, and just hold space for it. You know what I mean? Because not everything can be explained with just like the trivia method sometimes, I feel.
Yeah, well said.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, that's one of the things I have on my list too, is intuition, right? Because if you look at a set of data and I look at a set of data, and we may both come away with it with a different conclusion of why that is, right? Take the germ theory debate, right? It's a virus, it's terrain. It's like, I don't know, something is contagious, because my family just went through something that's contagious, apparently. I don't know what it is,
or how,
or how it works.
Oh yeah, so, you guys doing better? I hope.
Yeah. We're basically better, but it took a minute. But it's like even with that, with health, your belief, your belief that the chakras are real, your belief that the prana is real, is gonna make it real. And you'll find out if it's real or not by using it. Maybe sometimes you won't believe it's real, but I want to say real quick about the word believe. This is something that just, again, look at the definition of something, right? Believe, leave, L-I-E-V-E, comes from light. Okay, now take the E away from leave, it's live, right? Be live, right? So what do you be live? What do you be light, right? What are you lighting up? You know what I'm saying? What are you keeping in the shadows? For. Right.
Like living for.
Leave actually means live, which means light, right? What gives us life? The light, right? It's like, so it's not, belief is not always bad, right? So that's one thing that I've come to, Derek, is that instead of saying government is always bad, you say there's a true and a false form of government. True government we should be doing. We shouldn't be
internal monarchy shit.
Yeah, we shouldn't be shitting on government, right? But see how they get us?
Yeah.
They get us to shit on government. Government means mind control. I shouldn't be shitting on mind control. I should be mastering my mind control. And the trivium tells us we should be using rhetoric to influence others. That's a form of mind control. Now, what are you influencing people with, and how are you doing that, right? And that's the difference between a dark magician and a light magician, right? Like you're either lighting it up with the correct light, or you're lighting it up with the false light, or live, which is evil, right? Which is live backwards. Oh man, then I got into what else is the word live is veil, right? The veil. It seems like it's evil. It's the veil. It's the thing that, I'm going deep on you guys here, but these are all the gems for the last few weeks. But like when someone says, I see this old couple the other day, William, my son, is jumping and running in puddles, and this couple's just looking at him with amazement, right? Like, wow, I wish I could just jump in puddles like that, right? And I said, yeah, you guys have a good morning. And I thought, good morning, right? We say good morning. Why is it a good morning? And the reason why it's a good morning is because this realm is the realm of death. It's the realm where we come to experience death, but death isn't real. If you are aware that you are a spiritual entity at all times, then death is not a real thing. But to experience death is an important part of the development or growth, and so we come here to experience death, and people would say, if I say it's the death realm, they might think that that's negative, but you can't have life without death.
Yeah.
And so we come here and we wish each other a good morning, because everything is about getting back up, rising. The sun rises, it dies at the end of the day. The year goes through its cycle, and we basically are mourning all the time, because we're here to experience that sense of loss and that sense of property.
Passing of time, right? And we call, someone's passed over.
Yes.
There's all sorts of little deaths every second, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, part of that idea is I've kind of gone to a level of that there is an evil entity here, but I think it's pretty weak. And I think it controls us through a television signal, a radio wave, a message, and drama to keep us trapped. And here's another tie-in, a synchronicity. What is that system of propaganda? What is it called? The news.
The news. The noose.
Media, yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of the noose, they give you the news, right? And think about this. The news is north, east, west, south, right? It's not going the right way. It's throwing you off. It's not going north, east, south, west, right? It's going north, east, west. It's giving you the news. It's the false noose. It's the false noose
around his neck.
Exactly.
And it's crooked. It's sort of taking you on these zigzag paths. If you think of it like that.
And it's sort of like it doesn't let you complete the cycle. It's sort of like it's skipping a part of the cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
Very, very interesting. So what else is on your list there, John?
I'll go down my list a little quick. So entertaining thoughts is just the idea that, like, it's the mark of
we were talking about Logan as far as like being able to suspend your thoughts or your preconceived beliefs and all that stuff to receive that new information. What you were talking about, and Leslie, all those words that start with the letter C and everything, that is such a primer to what you were saying even earlier before, John, as far as like being able to receive that feminine essence of especially for guys, if they're not like in tune with that feminine essence, that energy, and the archetype of being able to receive things in people and compliments, whatever, then you might be closed off to a bit.
So entertaining thoughts, and then definitio vocabularum, which is just the Latin way of saying define your terms, right? Like, what are we talking about when we say government? You mean the institution of government? Okay, then we can work from there. But define your terms. The trivium, the quadrivium, critical thinking, logical fallacies. We need to learn the logical fallacies. We need to learn the rules of debate. and kind of like set standards for ourselves of where we're gonna, how we're gonna have this certain discussion. The importance of zeticism, which is like experiencing what you experience. Like, how do you really know something? It's by experiencing it. And it's very like hyper skeptical, right? Like, you basically don't really, I don't know, whatever Neil deGrasse Tyson told me because I haven't experienced it, right? So intuition, belief, rhetoric, and then okay, I got to this idea where it's called the discernment principle. The basic idea is that the nature of humans is to discern, right? And the way that they control us is by messing up our discernment, right? By giving us bad information. And so this is how I came to the idea of of objective morality, okay? Because I had a hard time, like, how do we know morality is objective? Like, it's like, it's, and I'm still up in the air with it. But this is what I worked through in my mind, was that there's a dualism to reality, a left brain, a right brain. Everything is symmetrical, split down the middle, a right and a wrong, a black and white, up and down, right? Like, there's this, and like, even look at it like the binary system, right? The zeros and ones. That's what runs all computers, zeros and ones, right? Yes or no, go or don't go. So there's this dualism that's built into us, like, and that is objective, I would say. I think no matter who you talk to, like, again, it's hard to say it's objective because someone might say, no, I don't have that. But like, most people have this system in their mind of compare and contrast.
Right. And then the Hermetic principle of polarity kind of supports that, right?
So I would say the Hermetic principle is all about dualism, except for the first one. Everything's one thing, but look at all this dualism, right? And like that dualism is meant to be resolved, right? So that's what human nature is to do that, is to resolve that paradox. And that discernment is morality. So if you look up the term morality, it means that you are using your discernment in a situation. That's morality. Now, if you make an action that harms somebody, people might say it was immoral, but if you're using your discernment to try to not harm, then I'd say that is the closest thing you can get to objective morality. But again, for each person in each specific moment, that's going to come down to somewhat of a judgment call, And so an example I'll use for that is if someone like rapes somebody, okay, does somebody else have the right to kill that person?
That with the self-defense principle might say yes, right?
The victim,
a certain position would say yes, but some people might say no. In my mind, he deserves to be raped. Like, I'm just saying, like, not to be harsh or anything, but
I've been thinking about, I've thought about that, is do the Hermetic principles, when you look at, rhythm and frequency and these different aspects and cause and effect, and we tend to all, align around the right for self-defense, but there's a degree of defense.
Right, exactly.
Right. And is there a guideline to tell us, that if someone trespasses on our yard, that you don't shoot them, first, right?
Exactly.
Even though I've heard it said, like through Mark Passio, that if someone violates your natural law rights, that you do have you have the right to defend yourself to any extent. And I've always wondered about that, because some reactions or responses may seem extreme, and what are the nuances of that? How do you go about determining whether, what if it's a person with Down syndrome that is on your trespassing over your boundary, right? So.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just good to keep that in mind, that like, I think to me, you can get close to objectivity And again, I think it's a little bit more like consensus, but again, you have to be careful with that because consensus is, not necessarily what we want, depending on, what people are being fed. You
Exactly.
don't want that consensus.
Yeah.
The other thing I have written here is that discernment is where our sense of freedom derives from. The sense that we have the ability to choose and do things. It comes through that discernment principle, that ability to, like, again, it's like left, right, make a choice. Left, right, wrong, make a choice. Like that third thing that we do, that our action, that's, in a sense, resolving the paradox. You just want to, again, a lot of this then gets based into what we are teaching people. One thing I was going to say is that, with the idea of mind control, there's this video online. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's this kid who actually appears to be autistic, potentially, just the way he moves. He might not be, but and he's probably about 7 years old, maybe. And his dad is just firing questions at him about natural law, and the kid's just answering him, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I see a lot of people posting and go, "Oh yeah, look, this is amazing." Well, that's government, right? Like that dad is using government. I mean, that kid would not say that on his own,
Right.
So
no one calls it that, but yeah,
you wouldn't call it that, but I mean, it is that. I mean, and
it's
there is
teaching, but yeah,
there is a positive way that you steer your child. But that steering, I think that that's another thing that is kind of flies into conflict for me with the natural law perspective completely, is that, or the anarchy perspective, is that I do think that there is an authority in nature that's inherent in nature. And I think that's the authority of a parent. Mm-hmm. I think that if there's anything that we actually create in this world, it's a kid. We're actually using a piece of our DNA to create another human being. Right. But I mean, you could technically say that we don't create anything and that God creates everything, and I think that's like the true unity perspective, but we are co-creators. I think we can see that. And so like we do have authority and responsibility and accountability for our children. And, but again, yeah. I don't think it takes away from the argument that like government authority is false, or you not having the right to choose whether or not you want to participate is false, so.
What about that sovereign individual authority? Like I'm the CEO of about 3 trillion cells in my own body, so I gotta be the authority of all that, but I'm just kidding.
Well, right. There's an authority there too. You're right. I've like just in our, like, just recently, I mean, I've heard this idea before, but I even kind of have issues with the term sovereign, but I get what it means. Like we're saying, like, we're sovereign, we're no one rules over me, but in reality, something does rule over you, and that's natural law. Right. And you can call it, you can call it God, you can call it the Nus, whatever. There is something that rules over you, and so again, I understand what the anarchy and natural law community and what I've been saying for the last 5 years. I understand why I'm saying sovereignty, right? But I think like there's sort of this idea that maybe we need to get to a mental level where we're like, no, God rules, natural law rules, So anyway, I don't know. I've given you guys so much stuff.
That's all right. No, it's really, I appreciate how deep you take thought, right? And I think it is the next level for us. And it leads me to that question about like, why is this important? Why is it important to keep questioning and challenging that which maybe we get comfortable with or think as true?
Yeah, I think because that's an interesting question. For me, who's always been like a spiritual person and like a truth seeker because of that, like I want to know what's going on. that's just a natural drive that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't deny that.
Yeah.
And I think that by applying this process to that energy, we can maybe, make it more analytical and scientific to satisfy that side of our mind. But we can't do it without also understanding the occult side of it. There's another divide: occult versus materialist, right?
Yeah.
An occultist believes that there's this spiritual energy, right? Like, what's the first question they ask you when you go to a Freemason hall? Do you believe in a higher power?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you don't, you can't come in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and again, like, I mean, people might think, oh no, Freemasons are terrible, whatever. I think we all know that, like, it's a tool, and it can be corrupted, and most of these tools have been corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you can look at it as the positive and the negative, then you can work with it, and you can understand that, like, you can't have one without the other,
Yeah.
So I would just say, yeah, it's for me, that's why it's important. But to some people, it's not. And I think that those people are just, they're not ready to go to the next level. And I think that they may be choosing to stay here longer. That's what I really think ultimately. But again, that's part of my belief, right? I do kind of think that, like, we are working here to make it better. We should always work to, like, make it better. And that means being moral, using morality, using your discernment, trying to not cause harm. But I don't necessarily have a sense that, like, we have to save the world,
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's important for me. I think it's important for the truth community to get to a point, if there is a truth community, right? To get to a point where we're able to have these conversations and, like, maybe not agree or maybe agree, but, like, still be able to resolve, like, but I see this, I see this part of it. This makes sense. Like, let's work with this,
Right.
So yeah, I think it's important for the truth movement.
And where are we moving? Because it just seems like everyone has their priorities not really in the right order, and we're not even on the same page. And yeah, we're lacking the unity within the community, which is why we always hesitate to say that word, right? But yeah, like,
I'll tell you where we're moving.
Aside, what are the goals? What are we trying to do? Like, we want, like, freedom. We don't want to pay, like, taxes. We don't want to be charged, so much money by the oligarchic, corporate systems, and be oppressed by all these, systems of indoctrination and divide and conquer and shit.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think where we move is we do move to, however you want to look at it, correcting your status within that system. And then working outside of it. But if you have to operate in it on some level to get yourself more out of it, I think that there is a way to do that. What I've done is, so I registered my business name, which means, like, registering the name on the birth certificate. So the theory I'm going by is that, but there's a bigger concept to this idea. Some people do, like, the state national thing. I don't necessarily believe in that either, but what I do believe in is taking that step to, like, handle your affairs on that level, on that 2D level, on that paperwork, right? Mm-hmm. That they've gotten us into contracts with, understanding how to get out of it. A lot of that is a spiritual thing, so I would say, at least for me, Derek, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to use this idea of, like, critical thinking to get people to a spiritual level, which again was really what Rudolf Steiner was doing. And what, but that's what all of these occult, schools are doing, right? I mean, to some extent. To me, that we're working on self-development.
Yeah. So, John, continuing about the why question. So there are folks who will say certain topics, have become too contentious and they're pulling people off track of what we really need to be doing, which is to teach people about natural law, right? So there's a tendency to like shut down certain debates. The flat earth topic is one of them, and I'm sure there's others, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, whenever a topic is being shut down, that's a little bit concerning to me. Around it feels a little like censorship, and censorship seems to be, in my mind, like a problem, one of the core problems. If we say that a topic is off limits, and so why is it important to have conversations and debates about these various topics that are creating some controversy? Or do you disagree with that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that that obviously I think the debate is an important thing. But if you don't want to participate in the debate, you don't have to. I mean, there's actually a page on YouTube. It's called The Crucible, and they just do debates. They do, but it's like I don't ever even seen them talk about flat earth. I don't even think I've ever seen them talk about natural law. But point being is it's a platform, that you can choose to go on. There are more like platforms popping up, on the internet where, I mean, it's basically just people streaming on YouTube, but people are having conversations about just the variety of topics. And, it's kind of a new phenomenon. I mean, I know we've had like panels and things like that, but to just have it kind of free for all, people can come up and chat. That's, I think that's a positive thing. I think that, again, like the information that we put out in like a presentation, like it's going to an echo chamber right now, and so I think stepping out into these other topics is really important, like even just talking to people that just like don't believe in your shit at all, like it's, you want to ignore some of it, but you kind of have to know, what the cultural, whatever thing is happening. I mean, I think ultimately we need to ignore that stuff, but it can be a gateway into a conversation with somebody. Like if you can get them on the level of like, whatever TV show or whatever, like, but then you can maybe get into, morality, or like if someone like is like, worried about how animals are treated, you can like talk about natural law or something like that. Yeah, I mean, like, I think that for me, what's important is like being authentic as much as possible, right? Which, I mean, that, that's pretty difficult in itself, and coming online and like presenting, yourself to the world and how you do that and what you what you keep back,
Right.
So, but for me, I don't want anyone telling me I can't talk about something, and and I don't, so I just think like for me, I have to be authentic, do my own thing, where I can say whatever I want, and people can take it or leave it. You know what I mean? And then, so yeah, I do think it's important. I do think it's important to put out content, but I've had to step back from it a little bit and kind of look at like, well, what's important to me and what's my perspective, right? Like you kind of have to look at what you have to offer, because it is ultimately about, improving yourself, and then sharing that with the world, and, letting the chips fall where they may. Right.
I also think that if we keep dividing ourselves into camps, right, and just like putting an invisible divide between us, like, oh, we're not going to talk to that person over there because they think this opposite way than me, we're just participating in more compartmentalized separation, as opposed to, stepping into the conversation from the place of those, that self energy I described, where we are open and curious. Yes. And asking questions and hearing. I had a conversation with someone who's pretty bought into the whole, climate change agenda, storyline. And, at first, I could feel myself, drawing certain conclusions about this person and feeling a little bit of disconnect or opposition. But then with further dialogue, I came to realize that we're like at the core of, on the heart level, in the same place. Like we're both coming from a place of care and love for the earth and for humanity, and have concerns about the future for our children, right? So within these differences, I think we can always find the areas where we are, like you were saying, Derek, where we have actually a lot in common. And so if we can put aside the need to be right, or to be like in this intellectual debate of like, which involves a certain ego aspect of putting someone down, it seems like a lot of it, like you said, is about what is the spirit that you're entering into this dialogue with. And if you're coming in with the need to be right, or to put down, or to make fun of someone, that's not going to result in a productive conversation.
Right. Yeah, and it's like, if someone says like, well, what does it matter what the shape of the earth is? Well, yeah, what does it matter? So don't get mad if someone, and that's on both sides. That's on both sides. Because like I said, I mean, I understand that early on, like, the flat earthers were super annoying, but then I saw the reaction by the community I was in, right? And like, what I saw was a lot of just ad hominem attacks, and no one really like having a discussion about it, which I'm like, yeah, it is a psyop. That's a perfect psyop, right? The psyop, again, it's always like a dialectic, but it doesn't mean one is wrong or the other is right. It could be a third one, or it could be a combination of both, right? And that's the funny thing about that, is that's what I really think it is. I do think it's I think there's a sphere around us, but we are on a level plane, and but again, like, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, that's just where I've gotten to. That's from what I've looked at, from what I understand, and from who I'm choosing to trust, with certain information. I'm making this, this is where I'm sitting, this is how I see it, but I know that that's going to change. At least throughout my whole life, it constantly has, so
but what do you say to skydivers? Because I have friends like Maria West. She's seen like the curve of the earth.
I mean, all I can, again, I could take her word for it, right? Or I could take word for the video footage I've seen of people shooting rockets, way as high as we're allowed to go, basically, right? So higher than whatever a sky jumper is doing, and it looks level, as high as you go in any video I've seen, the horizon remains, it rises to your eye level, right? And so if someone says, oh, I've been up there and I see the curve, I mean, that's a secondary source. The video, you could argue, is a secondary source. It could be altered. I don't know.
Then there's the physiology of our vision, and maybe there's limitations to that, or other reasons that there's a perception experience, right? So that's where it gets tricky, right? When you
even the way that your eye actually works, right, is it's like taking in information that's like going into your brain, and then your brain is like rendering what you see. And there's functions in your brain that like shut down so that you don't see certain shit, because your brain doesn't think you're ready for it, and so
there's optical illusions, those little drawings where you can, if you look at it one way, it looks like X. You look at it another way, it looks like Y. And so there's all sorts of interesting nuances here when it comes to our perceptions.
I think that's interesting too, with the idea of the trivium, and that when we say, grammar, I mean, all of that grammar is technically a secondary source, You know, it's like a primary source would be you experiencing it. That's a primary source of information, right? And so again, that kind of gets into the idea of zeticism, that like, whatever, what am I trusting? If I limit it to what I see and what I observe, how does that change, how I see the world, or what, what the world looks like? So for me, that, I think, to me is what, like, when I saw the flat earth model and to me it made sense, then I looked at everything very differently. It was very much a paradigm shift of what I actually know, and what is just shit that's been told to me, propaganda that's been fed to me for my whole lifetime, and even longer, right? But it does then call into question all this other stuff. So in terms of why it matters, in my opinion, is that I'm pretty confident that Elon Musk is a total fraud, that they're not launching rockets into outer space, that is all a huge psyop to keep us, thinking that we're going to go to we're going there, like physically, like you could probably go there spiritually, but like, you're not, like, all of that, like, so anyway, it's sort of like, it really, I think that's a part of the divide, is once you go into that paradigm, then when I hear people in the truth community, like, who like Elon Musk, that is a contradiction in my mind, like, but to that guy, it's Elon Musk is like, okay, and there's like truth to Elon Musk. I mean, that is a pretty big divide. So to me, it's important then that, like, me and that guy could sit down at some point and have a discussion.
Yeah.
And say, but why do you, like, how do you know this? Like, why do you trust what he's saying? Like, what evidence are you actually seeing? And
staying skeptical, right? That was part of the important thing, is not just hook, line, sinker, trusting, believing, jumping into a camp.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, again, like, I'm not necessarily at the point where I'm like, really, I'm going to try to convince you that it's this, but, there's, I think, like, part of the psyop is there are things wrong with both models, and
it's like we need to keep our thinking sharp, and our minds, our thought ability to think and use the trivium and our intuition is one of our key powers, right? To discern and find peace, freedom, protect ourselves from enslavement. So these exercises of thinking, whatever the topic, have a relevance, I think, and also to us as teachers, right? And
yes, yeah, because I mean, if the real goal is to wake up everybody, you're gonna have to have a creative approach to a lot of people.
Yeah,
and
like compassion,
huge.
Yeah,
huge. Oh, that was one of your list of C things, right?
Yeah.
I got to get that list. That list is perfect.
Yeah. The way I kind of keep my compassion centered and composed is just realizing what I've been through and how we're all born into, these systems of, like I mentioned before, generational trauma and levels of mind control to whatever degree people were on, as parents, and then they give birth to whoever, and it's just perpetuated into so many things. And there's like psyops all over the place, dialectics, divisions, and there's like psyops within psyops and all these things. It's a multifaceted, infrastructure of distorted information to get us all imbalanced within ourselves and as the Hermetics would say. And just at this point in my life, I'm, doing so much research for over a decade. Really need to like recenter and, just hold true to what actually benefits me and having that ripple out to benefit others, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to discern through all the minutia and all that stuff, and get that pure good, I guess, so.
Mm-hmm.
That's so true, man. I mean, that's what it's all about, I mean, really, we say it and it seems kind of cliche, but it's like, that's all the information is right there inside you, right here. Like you have it all. That's the beauty of life, is that we are connected to this noose,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, the natural law, God, whatever you want to call it. Like it's, once you tap into that, then you see the beauty of all of this. And one thing you were saying, I wanted to comment on, Derek, is that like this idea of resolving the paradox, right? So I'm going to throw a random conspiracy at you, right? So the overarching conspiracy would be the actor-based reality, right?
Hmm.
And that's that, like, most of these events that have happened are like actors, right? And so take one of those is Paul McCartney, right? The theory goes that he died in a car accident and they replaced him with a lookalike, and they taught him to become Paul McCartney. And that's when they came out with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And there's all these hints from that point on that Paul is dead. And they're putting him on album covers. They're putting it in the music. They're putting it in lyrics. It's like Paul is dead. Like throughout their career, there was this conspiracy that Paul McCartney is fake. Okay. And then you could go bigger, that the Beatles were a psyop the whole time, right? An intelligence operation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, here's the resolve of the paradox. Either that actually happened, or someone wants us to think that happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? So either way, someone is up to something. I guess you could say a third option is it's just the universe, like coincidence. I guess you could like try to use that argument, but like they either really did that shit or they want us to think they did. And I think that tends to be true with every conspiracy.
Hmm.
Like 9/11. At some point I realized they're giving us all these little breadcrumbs,
Mm-hmm.
the frickin' passport in the rubble. Someone put that shit there, you
Yeah.
know? Like, why would they do that? Why would they report that? Why would they put that out there? To get you and me going, what the fuck?
Right.
What? Building 7? What? And so now the question is, whoever's doing that, are they trying to wake us up? Right? Like, are they leaving clues?
Mm-hmm.
And to say like, wake up, you dummies.
Right.
This is all freaking theater,
Right.
It's like, so I don't know. I mean, and again, that, what's the purpose of going there? I mean, honestly, I can't help but want to know what the truth is. And if I see something weird like that, I do want to look into it and go, well, and then I say, how does that fit with this? Oh,
Right.
there's a lot of this actor-based shit kind of that seems like it's either real or they want you to think.
Right.
Alex Jones is Bill Hicks, or they want you to think he is.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
much.
You know?
And then
Matters
you
so
can
much
start.
in my life. Sorry.
You can start to see all the patterns of that, right? So you're not just looking at one incident in isolation, but then you're seeing hundreds and hundreds of things over the last decade or more, right? Or century. And then
Yeah.
what does that mean? I think, one of the key things here is in our own self-awareness, in our own center, to be checking ourselves, right? Checking our thoughts, aware of our thoughts and beliefs, and then being willing to question, like, how do I know this is true? How do I know this is true? And we may believe something is true, but do we really know it's true? And then if we don't know it's true, then that needs to like leave a door open to receiving information that could say it's not true.
Yeah.
And what kind of information are we getting? There's so many
From
angles
where?
and all these things, breadcrumbs galore, and we always have to keep in mind in the context of today. Since the monetization of YouTube, there's that money motivator for people to pump out whatever kind of content about any fucking thing. Any little sniff of anything these days, you notice that boom, oodles and dozens, hundreds of videos about the same damn topic, because they all want to get that little monetization sometimes. Not every single one, of course. And some people are just really on the ball and do it out of pure, goodness of their heart or whatever, for the, a great worker for working for truth, service to truth rather. But and that's not to say like, the CIA back in the JFK days, like people were paid to put out that psyoptic, logic for people to,
For
get
sure.
all confused
sure.
about it,
Yeah, I mean, I actually had this thought one time that like the whole conspiracy theory movement or the whole truth movement is a giant initiation. It's a mass initiation where it's like you couldn't get these people to like wake up on their own, so you have to like hey, what's up with this, like why, and then it's like there you see all these steps, and like maybe they knew it probably works hand in hand. They probably know there's a natural consciousness awareness that happens, and like maybe they're trying to like mediate it in some way, freaking vaccinate us, and try to like.
It's like the New Age movement as well. They knew we were going to go in that direction, so they had to distort the hell out of it, right? Yeah, sorry, cut you off.
So it's like the elephant in the living room is this assumption or belief that there are malevolent intentions by some people somewhere that have a lot of power.
Right.
And I do think that is one of the divides between people. For me, it was a turning point when I went from thinking, this is just sort of, random results of people being really ego-based and not really, being evolved in their own, maturity in a way, and that it's not really a organized system of malevolence towards us, evil. And when I came to the point of realizing, oh, wait, no, Leslie, that's naive. There is enough evidence here to show that there is an evil force here. People consciously choosing to do wrong things, to harm us. They're manipulating the laws of nature and manipulating us. They know us better than we know ourselves. That was a turning point where then I'm questioning everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Because then, like now I'm at the point where it's kind of shifted again to like a lot of these events look like they were completely staged, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe no one died. Well, that's kind of weird, Are these people evil? What does evil mean? Okay, they're doing shit backwards. Why are they doing shit backwards? Well, because they want us to like focus on this realm. They want us to stay into like the material realm. For some reason, they want to pull us away from spirit, and they want to keep us focused on this material reality society we've created.
Yeah.
And so the way they do that is shadows on the wall, right? It's freaking
Plato.
Yeah. So then you're like, okay, what is evil, right? Are they really trying to kill everybody? Are they, I've come to the reality that like, if you get down to like what this earth is that we can agree upon, it's like, it's either a school to learn, mm-hmm. or it's a prison, and they're harvesting our negative energy, and it's like, I don't know. I guess that's when you get.
I think it's both. I mean, it can be, and that's true too. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both, and very likely is.
Amen.
And the schooling could be the more natural experience. Well, and then we have these folks attempting to imprison us by telling us, disconnecting us from our spiritual nature. And then that they are also teachers to us, right? It's triggering, it's like catalyzing our growth in this school. So we can't, and that's the natural energy that no matter what person is trying to manipulate or control us, the natural law still rules,
Yeah. I kind of think I don't necessarily ascribe to Crowley, but I think like when he said like do what thou wilt, he is kind of saying like do whatever you want. It doesn't matter, right? You can't beat this thing, like maybe the universe needed us and to go so individualistic, right? Like spiritually we had to experience this individuality where we can do whatever we want. And I have free will. I can do whatever I want. And that had to be taken to its extreme for us to come back to center and resolve the paradox and say, I don't need all that alcohol and drugs and shit like that. Like we did that, we did that. We know what that does. We can like come back together as a humanity, and we can like let go of those bad things. It's sort of like, on the microscopic level, it would be like integrating your alters, right? It's like, like we look at one thought I used to have back in the day was like, when I was like, George Bush is the worst person in the world, right? In the, 2007, 2006, this guy like started wars, like they 9/11 was an inside job, like all that stuff. But I stepped back and I thought, if I was George Bush, would I do anything different? And it's like, well, it's easy to say as John, well, yeah, I wouldn't have done that. I would have told my dad to go F himself, But as George Bush, where I was basically the prince growing up, I could do whatever I want. And I'm in this family and they're telling me what my values are. And they're telling me, like, would I do anything different? Probably not. So like, ultimately George Bush is me, George Bush is me in another lifetime,
That's such an interesting idea because, even if we, if it's true, I've heard things that he was a victim of mind control himself, of trauma-based mind control, and anyone is vulnerable to that. We all are vulnerable to that. We've already been a subject of mind control, and that I think that is really important context to keep in mind every time we're like defending a point of view, and to step back, go to that self energy, right? And then question, where are our thoughts coming from? Where did this belief derive? Go to that inward place and check in with our intuition, work with the trivium. It's a process of deep inquiry, and it is ultimately a spiritual inquiry. And it reminds, what I'm thinking is that, like, ultimately the bottom line is that anyone or anything that sort of gets in the way of our right to discern, to do the process of discernment and thinking, is violating our right.
Yeah.
Hey, so we're all talking about the trivium, but no one never mentioned and applied it to the nous, like who, what, where, when, why made creation, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
All those W's and how.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, John? I want your thought on this. The quadrivium, one of the elements of the quadrivium is studying astronomy, right? And so I was thinking about some of and it goes all the way back, like Aristotle talking about, the shape of the earth and the stars. And then you look at astrology, and that's all based on globes and planets and things all over. And I would think that, but where did that come from?
Well, in in my opinion, and from what I understand, it's technically cosmology, or it's not astronomy. It's arithmetic, geometry, music, and cosmology.
Cosmology.
Right?
So how would you define the difference?
I'd say ultimately there is no difference. The only difference would be if the assumption in astronomy is that we could actually leave here and go to these are physical lights in the sky. An astrologist would say it's metaphysical, although I know most astrologists, or a lot of astrologists, are believers of the globe theory. But if you look at most ancient astrology was based on flat Earth model. Ptolemy was a flat Earth model up until Tycho Brahe was also that the Earth was stationary and did not move, and that all these things moved above us, and that. I mean, I actually need to research this a little bit more, but I know Crow 777 has done a lot of good work on this. Is Tycho Brahe had the system where it was geocentric, but then there was a component that there was another orbit around the sun, so that it actually was a much deeper explanation of what the planets are doing based on, and this is him just observing it. Possibly with the naked eye, I'm not sure about that, but this is Tycho Brahe using very limited tools and being able to map this. So he mapped it, and then after him came Copernicus and Galileo. Am I wrong about that? Anyway, I know Copernicus for sure, but that the Copernican model came in, that they took a lot of Brahe's stuff and then altered it. So if you looked, from what I've understand, from what I've read, I've been listening on audiobook to the Aristotle. I always get mixed up on who wrote what, but Aristotle's talking about Plato, or Plato's talking about Socrates. But in that, in one of those books, I'll have to find it, there is a description of what the cosmos are, and it's much more equivalent to the Natural Freedom League logo, that there are these spheres around us, and that at these different spheres are different spiritual levels, and those planets that we see tie into those realms. And so anyway, but I honestly I would have to look more into that in terms of what Aristotle and Plato and those guys thought, because I have kind of heard that argument from people who believe the globe earth theory, that they are kind of saying that the conspiracy goes the other way. But from what I understand, everyone was flat earther in every culture up until about 500 years ago, when Copernicus introduced the globe model. And then, if you want to say, well, that they killed, they were killing people who believed in the globe or whatever. I guess I would argue that could be part of the conspiracy.
Galileo asserts that the Earth revolves around the sun. He's put to death in prison.
Right.
So it's interesting, these extreme reactions of feeling threatened by ideas,
right,
and proposing a different model.
And I think that's part of the generational trauma, or past life trauma, like being burnt at the stake, that kind of stuff, relatives, ancestors, or even, your own soul code blueprint, which, Rodney Goodwin, he's been on our show twice, gets super deep into astrology and astropsychology. And the study of the planets, it's more about the archetypes of consciousness and how it applies to one's life, and even certain events, and just the constellational placement of things in any given moment, any day, right? So keeping those.
If you look at most diagrams of the nous, and these are all from, I think, from what I think Greek times or whatever, it's like each realm is like a planet, or each little ring. So it's like the moon, the sun, Venus,
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
So, again, like, I think there's probably a component of both of them that are true, and that's what makes it kind of difficult. And then I also think that, it's just, it's one of the, I think the biggest thing for people is like this idea that so many people would have to be in on it. But the way I see it is that the way that they can compartmentalize. So, for example, when I used to work in childcare, I had a parent come in, and he worked at UC Berkeley, and he built satellites. So he came in to share, and basically what he did was he built a box that had like technical computer stuff in it, whatever, and that box was going to go on the satellite, right? And that's what he knew, and that's what he taught.
Oh, right.
But then he tells the kids, the rocket goes into space and then it goes into orbit, and that's how it works. And that's what he believes, right? And like, I don't think he's in on the conspiracy. That's what he believes. He hands it to his higher up. They tell him, "Oh, here's what's happening." Well, here's what's happening, as far as we can tell, is all CGI. They're not actually filming a rocket flying in space. They're not actually it's all some type of like altered video of what's happening. Like when they landed something on Mars, they were like, "Oh, this is a CGI like represent." Like, they tell you, but most people that watch it are like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, that was CGI, right? "Oh, no, not that." And I'm like,
yeah, it's funny they say these things, but to get back to center, and we're kind of getting towards that time of the hour. Just going back real quick. I mean, you brought up a great point of just the compartmentalization of so many things, and like you look at any institution, pretty much there's like hierarchy of even like a pyramid with the like the higher uppers, they know everything, and the people down below, they only know what they're supposed to know, type of thing. That's how these things operate sometimes,
Yes.
So how are we going to bring it back, Leslie, if you want to find?
Well, John, let me hand that to you. Like, how would you summarize, what is your final kind of words to summarize what you think with the takeaway from these complex thought processes we've been talking about?
I think that it does come down to truth discovery, the discernment principle, and spiritual development. That there is a truth that we can come to agree upon, and a reality that we can come to agree upon, but the knowing that like we shouldn't completely trust that is what kind of keeps the fun going. Like we know there's limits to that, but we can come to an idea of like that foundational principle of do no harm, right? Like that's the ultimate purpose of discernment, is to like, treat people the way you want to be treated. That, that golden rule is natural law. That's the heart of it, right? What you put out, you get back. And like we all, ultimately seem to lean towards wanting to do the moral thing. So diving into that truth discovery, strengthening your discernment principle, and knowing that like that's what makes you special as a human. Is that you have that process in you. Animals don't do that. Most animals don't. Some think on a certain level like us, but actually the Rosicrucians, which is where Steiner comes from, I was listening to this the other night, they believe that some of the animals have gotten smarter because they've been around us so much, that they've tapped into the spiritual level that we're at, right? So anyway, knowing that like the discernment is what you're here to do. Like, don't take it lightly, have at the foundation of that, do no harm, do no harm. Always keep that at the center of like what you're trying to accomplish. You want to achieve for yourself, you want to create for yourself, but you also don't want to cause harm, or you want to cause as little harm as possible. And then that this is all for spiritual development, that ultimately we're trying to get people to go within, to like grow without this concept of like the spiritual world and like reality and this invisible force that is we're trying to get people to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like, we can use these processes, these platforms, this dialogue to create, sort of a framework of like how we just discuss things and have discourse and again, like I'm totally in agreement with do no harm as the principle of that, and that's at the heart of natural law. Who cares what people believe if it's not harming?
All right, I got a good one for you, because this needs to be emphasized a lot more. Of we all throw out these terms, do no harm, and how does that look like? How does that feel like? And how are we actually applying that to every single second moment interaction of our daily lives, as far as like non-aggressive speech or non-violent speech, if you will, and having that compassionate side from that center chest as kind of like one's compass, which is what I wanted to get more into, as far as like that intuition and having that like radar, and being able to be in tune with your emotions, because those act like a radar. Then it's not just about being in your feels or whatever, right? But it's just like a way to discern reality and people, and like the cause and effect, like the action reaction type of thing. And so like it's the student of life stuff, real basic things, and we just kind of learn and grow from those things, and live and learn, and all that stuff, and we can observe so many different other people's reactions and what works and what doesn't. So it's Earth is quite an education system.
Yeah. I really hear, that one of the most important points is that we need to preserve our humanness and our human potential, which those 3 steps, which I really agree, they're really vital: truth discovery, discernment process, spiritual development, that we are as humans connected to source, and that we need to really hold on to our right to this process. Because if we let that go, we just become like machines, cogs in the wheel of some other consciousness that's taking away our humanity on some level. So this really is about, I think, preserving our core aspect of being human.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that is what makes us unique, and here we are sharing that process together, right? On this technology that, like somehow we got our hands on, so, it's, use it for positive, do no harm at your center. And, don't be afraid to dive into any topic and see how it relates, or if it doesn't relate, then you can discard it later. But I think, I love what you guys are doing. I appreciate you having me on.
It's been great.
Threw a lot of stuff at you, but I've been thinking about a lot of stuff lately.
Yeah, no, I knew you would, John. That's why I wanted you on, and I appreciate it very much. And I think you really are a good, role model of like a person who is embodying, this truth discovery process, and being authentic. I think that point of us each holding on to our authentic self is important, right? Because that's also the uniqueness of each one of us, and the way we seek truth is so vital to the big picture. So Thank you so much. Yeah. So this is Dissolving the Divide. And
John, please let the people know out there where they can find you. Obviously, we're going to drop links for you and your stuff, in the description notes. But and also, you said you got a new website coming up. Any other future projects? I think you're going to be presenting in the next Funnel conference as well, I believe.
Yeah, I'm going to present at Funnel. I'm working behind the scenes at Funnel, although I'm procrastinating. I got to get in contact with a few content creators, but
I'll show you some things, man. Yeah,
it's all good. And then naturalfreedomleague.com is basically where you can find all our stuff. I am starting a new website, naturaluniversalspirit.com. That'll be most of this content. And then I'm also I'm going to start doing a little live stream, probably like once a week. It's going to be called I Was Wrong. And just kind of go off on these topics, and see if I can get people to get involved and kind of evolve consciousness through dialogue. That'll be cool. It's hard though. I got to try to find a time a week I could do it, but I'm gonna try to do it on Mondays. I started off doing Moral Law Mondays with Natural Freedom League, so I kind of feel like Monday is a good day. It's kind of quiet. I can just hop on there, do an hour, talk about what's on my mind, see if anybody wants to comment or hop on and chat with me a little bit. I'm going to have a segment on there called Conspiracy Heresy, where I just talk about a random conspiracy and like why it matters, how it connects, all this stuff. So I'm just at that. Honestly, this weekend, I'm glad you guys had me on because you're inspiring me to get back into the game. So I've seen what you guys have been doing. You guys are doing great work. Keep it up.
Thanks, John. All right. We're looking forward to seeing your content.
Supporting you. Love, John.
Thank you, guys.
That day love. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a good day out there.
It's apparent to me that apparent to me means I'm caring for thee. Y-O-U-T-H. Turn back the page. No rage at a young age. Not trapped in a cage, but free to engage the world we've made. The life God gave.